something that we can get excited about. How many of you guys like to be the one that leads the charge, right? Like we get excited about a big task. There's a new project. I'm starting something. I'm starting strong. I'm moving forward. I'm happy. Everybody gathers around. We're all pushing and it's good. It's exciting. And then we realize just how big a task it is, because when Jesus says to go into all nations, and that marinates for a second, and we realize there's a lot of nations. That's a lot of people. And that's a lot of people not only that I love and I want to save, but that's a lot of people that I don't know and I don't understand. And it can be frustrating because some people want to hear the good news. Some people need to hear the good news. And some people don't want anything to do with the good news. And it can be hard. We can get picked on. There are places in the world right now where Christians are persecuted and crippled and killed because of spreading the gospel. So when he made this command, he didn't say, hey, you know what, Barb, go spread the gospel when you feel good about it. He meant to go spread the gospel whether or not it's rain or shine or good or bad. Go into all nations. And when we recognize that, and we step back and we say, are you sure, Jesus? Have you ever had somebody entrust you with a task? Right, like carrying something really important. I don't know if you guys are like this. Some people will hand me things to carry, and I think, did you see me walk today? Right, like I can barely walk with my own 2 feet and not thinking about anything. Like they'll hand me a computer, and I'm like, y'all trust me a lot. Right, like sometimes people give you a task, and you're like, wow, you trust me more than I trust myself. And I think there can be moments when we realize the weight of this. As we come to celebrate the birth of the purpose behind this, that hope, it can become overwhelming because reaching the world means we have to reach the world. And the stakes are high. Guys, one of the reasons that we started Passion Church is because we wanted to gather like-minded people who were utterly sold out on the issue of spreading the gospel. People who were so extravagantly passionate about God and passionate about others that we sit up at night saying, man, I can't wait to find somebody new to share the gospel with. I can't wait to find my purpose in God's kingdom. I want to grow and I want to move. But man, as we go 17 weeks in, I've had lots of conversations and some in my own head where I'm like, wow, this is a big task. There's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of details. There's a lot of stuff to do, and it can become overwhelming, but we are passionate about God and about people. And this is incredibly important because as we go into this season, more and more people are going to be looking at how we live and how we celebrate and how we move forward with Christ through good times and through bad. And the more steady you are, the better your witness is. The more steady you are, the better your witness is. I want to propose something to you guys. We can train our whole lives to have the most apologetically sound arguments for Christ. And it's good. We can go to Bible study and Bible school and memorize all the verses so that we can quote all the scriptures to people around us. And it's good. We can study our Bible every day at home and pray every evening at home and grow in our faith, and it's good. But the single biggest tool we have to witness to those around us is not how many Bible verses we've memorized, but how many of those Bible verses we exemplify in our life. Your biggest tool to witness to other people is the way you live. Conversely, the biggest tool we have to push people away from Jesus Christ is the way you live. Think about it this way. I'm in a scenario, and I have a conflict with Marshall, who tried to hide in the middle of the chairs back there instead of up front today. I don't know why. And the whole community is watching that when I have this conflict with Marshall, I lose my mind, right? On stage, I'm one way, but with Marshall in the lobby, I just blow up, and it's over something small. And maybe I've had a bad week, and maybe I've had a bad year, and maybe whatever, but people don't see that. What they see is Josh losing his mind on Marshall. And the first thing they think is not, oh, how bad of Josh. The first thing they think is, man, if that's the guy that follows Jesus, what does that say about him? And if they see me in conflict, maybe I'm driving down the road and someone cuts us off and they need prayer. Lots and lots of prayer. But instead of praying for them, I give them the 3-finger salute and tell them to peel the banana, right? I'm just like 30 of y'all got that. And the other ones are like, peel the banana? What are you talking about? Right? And they see me and they think, oh man. They don't think about Josh. They think about the God that Josh proclaims. And the same is true for all of us. When we leave this room, we represent Jesus Christ. Don't get me wrong. Please, please, please don't get me wrong. This is not me saying we have to have perfect lives, because if we do, we're in the wrong spot, right? Like we waiting to get to heaven. That's when we're going to be perfect. Here's what I mean. All of us at some points in our life live in the middle of a mess. And the difference between a good witness and a bad witness is not the lack of a mess, but how I live through that mess. Am I going through an argument in a godly way? People will notice that. Am I going through a disaster in a way that brings hope and peace to the people around me? People will notice that. Am I having an argument with Marshall but keeping my head cool, and Marshall's cool, and we settle our disagreement like good Christian brothers? People recognize that. So I'm not saying that we have to have perfect lives. I'm not saying we can't make mistakes, but how we react to those mistakes, how we live out God and those Bible verses that are so important to memorize and learn and to read inside those messes, inside those decisions, inside those days where I don't feel like it. That is our biggest witness, because people know. When you don't think they're looking, man, they are watching from around the corner. When you don't think anybody's listening, they've got little stethoscopes to the door. They're waiting and listening and watching because they want to see if we practice what we preach. Do we not just talk about a God that can save us, but do we actively seek to be discipled and become more like him? What people see when things go wrong is what you do next. So the question becomes this. If we can agree on that, and that sounds amazing, and we want to live a good life, and we want to have our messes contained and go through them in as dignified and Christ-like a way as possible, how do we do it? Because as we talked about earlier, we can take on a task and then halfway through it realize, I didn't anticipate this. So how do we move forward and share the gospel through those times? Now, to do this, I want to go back to a passage in Lamentations, and I want to set the context just a little bit. The prophet Jeremiah is often called the weeping prophet. And one of the things and the reasons for that is through this book, in the Lamentations, there's 5 poems or letters that he writes. and they are both questioning God, like lamenting, Lamentations. You don't really expect to go into the book and hear, surprise, right? Like he's lamenting the pain that God's people are going through. He's lamenting the way God's people have turned away from him, and he's going to God saying, God, when will you save us? And then finally saying, man, I hope and I wish that we could punish them, that you would punish them. And in this chapter, Jeremiah is looking around at the nation that's supposed to be God's people, and he is heartbroken because he's preaching the good news that they had at the time, and nobody's listening because there is pain, and there's bandits, and there's oppressors, and there's people who've conquered them, and people pulling them away from their God, and nobody's doing the right thing, and nobody's listening to the truth that he's preaching, and he is despairing at this, and yet he's still called to be God's prophet. Look what he says in verse 19 of chapter 3 of Lamentations. It says, I remember my affliction and my wandering, the bitterness and the gall. I well remember them. That's him saying, God, I see them every day. And my soul is downcast within me. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are made new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. And I say to myself, the Lord is my portion, therefore I will wait for him. Your compassions are made new every morning. You see, for us, every day is another chance to not only take hold of that hope, but share it with somebody else. Because God's compassion is made new every morning. Doesn't matter what happened. And I know sometimes it's what didn't happen that's just as painful. God's compassion is made new every day. And just like Jeremiah, when we go through those times, we can choose to focus on the things that are running around crazy in our life. We can choose to focus on the confusion and the contention and the politics and all the bad that's going on in the world. We can find 472,000 examples with one Google search. Or we can say, even though my soul is downcast, I will take joy because God is my hope. It's not economics, it's not politics, it's not my job, it's not how much money I have, it's not anything else. God is my hope. Amid a horrible disaster, Jeremiah chose to live this truth out loud. When Elijah faced hundreds of prophets in the Old Testament, he chose to live this out loud. When enemies cornered David on every side, and when Abraham faced trouble from his family and from the whole world, when Paul was persecuted by both Christians and his fellow Sadducees or Pharisees, when John was shipwrecked, when James was lost, when Mary lost her son, all those examples are unperfect people with messes in their lives, people that are broken, people that have horrible things happening. And the difference is they chose to live this truth out loud, that their hope was in something greater than their troubles. That even if they didn't end in their life here, they would not follow them to their life there. And that is the hope that we can share. And the best way to share that is in the middle of our pain, because it's authentic and it's real. It's easy to criticize Johnny or Marshall or anybody else, and they say when you follow Jesus, it's better when their lives are all good. It's harder to criticize that when Johnny is at his worst, his lowest day. Things have gone wrong every which way, and he still says in the middle of that, praise be to God. People will notice. That is how we as Christians can share the gospel in powerful ways that go far beyond me just saying to Kate, accept Jesus and you'll have a better life. Or me looking at Mark and saying, Mark, your beard is glorious, but you need Jesus too, right? Like, I can't just sit here and tell people about him. I need to show him the impact that he had on my life for that to take hold. But we have a tendency in Christendom, in America, to want to make ourselves feel better about it. So we'll write the name of Jesus on a can of green beans and then throw it at somebody's head. I fed you and I gave you Jesus. But the delivery tool didn't give that compassion. Right? We'll take that stuff and we'll drop it off. But man, we see good examples like Pete and Izzy going yesterday to Western North Carolina and handing out hundreds of gifts to children that are in need, that don't have homes, that need a little bit of love. And Izzy coming back last night, and I couldn't get her to shut up at 10 o'clock, right? Like, she's talking about this kid he's like, my family's still recovering. His grandparents had to bring him, and he just wanted a bike. And all these people had donated these bikes, and he got to be the first one to choose. And she said the smile on his face was awesome. That's how, when we live that out, what a better way to share the gospel. When Tori's sick, and 27 of our people try to shove food down her mouth, what a better way to live out the gospel. When Marshall's tired of Josh picking on him during service and 15 people call him and pray for him that week, what a better way to live out that gospel, right? When the VFW needs help shipping supplies to Western North Carolina that the whole community is gathered, and we show up to sort them, to pack them, to give them out. When we go with a medical bus and a trailer to help give people, what a better way to witness for Christ. Guys, the point is, the whole message of today, if we could make a comparison, we want to stay away from the trap of thinking telling somebody about salvation is the same as sharing that salvation with them. Imagine this. What if instead of sending his son to do for us, God just talked about it? What if instead of us celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ in Christmas, we were celebrating the revelation of a salvation that's yet to come? It has a totally different meaning to it. You see, we're a faith, we're a religion that follows after a God of action. Of action on the good days, of action on the bad days. So you got to remember, when he called his people through the Red Sea, it was still had water in it. Right? When he said to cross over the Jordan, it was still raging. When he gave fish and bread to the 5,000, they only had a couple. Right? He's a God of miracles, but he requires our action. He wants us to choose to be a part of that. And as Gabby gets ready to come back and play our final songs, I want to ask you today, in this Christmas season, when we're opening presents and we're smiling with family, or we're celebrating in whatever way it is, maybe, hopefully it's here Tuesday evening at 6 p.m. for our Christmas Eve service, and we've invited our friends and our families, and we're all lifting up our voices and then ending with candles raised high, praising Jesus. Whatever that is, are you going to choose, because it's your choice, I can't make it for you. Your spouse can't make it for you. Nobody can make this choice for you. It's yours. It's your choice. Are you going to be someone who just talks about hope? Or someone who does something with that hope? Who takes control and hold of that hope and intentionally lives it out loud to the people around them. And guys, there's 100,000 ways this can be applied. This can be applied by inviting somebody to coffee, inviting them to a meal, inviting them to dinner at your house. It can be applied by just looking. And by that I mean we walk by people every day in our sphere of influence, at work or at school, wherever that is, that are hurting. And maybe it's just looking around and noticing and stopping and saying, hey, can I pray for you? Maybe for you personally, you're saying, Josh, I would share the hope, but I don't got my life together. And on that, I want to leave us with just a little bit of challenge. 3 things. You say, Josh, how can I personally live this out? I want to challenge you first to do the simple things. Sometimes we think God requires these grandiose measures, these grand gestures, these giant gifts of our time. I'm going to read my Bible for 12 hours every day, and I'm going to live like a monk, and I'm not going to eat at all. When really, what he wants is for us to start with the little things. It's not where you end up, but it's a great place to start. Maybe you get the Bible app and you just read the little daily recap. It takes about 5 minutes. It's not where you want to end up, but it's a great place to start. Maybe you set a 5-minute timer every morning and that's what you pray for. It's not where you want to end up, but it's a good place to start. And when I do the little things in the bad times, what they'll help me do is shift my perspective and my focus back to a God that is bigger. The second thing is this. I want to encourage you to remove the ledges in your life. See, when the times get tough, all the things that we take for granted can get a little bit harder. And I would love to encourage you that the worse the times are, the more you need to step back from temptations in your life. I heard a pastor one time, Cam Huxford, I've heard Pete share it. It's a very common thing. It's called HALT. And it says, don't make decisions when you're hurt, angry, lonely, or tired. I prefer hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. But when those things are happening in your life, just take a little bit of time and remove those ledges. I don't know what that looks like for you, but for a lot of people, what it looks like is when I'm having a bad day, I stay away from a bar. When I'm mad, I stay away from that group of friends that I love to gossip with. When I'm angry, I don't go home and take it out on my family. I go for a drive and I listen to worship music for a little minute. Just take a moment, do the simple things, and remove the ledges in your life. The third thing is this. Train your mind. You ever heard the saying, what you put in comes out? Thumper said it best. If you don't got nothing nice to say, don't say it at all. The way we think will dictate the way we act. In fact, this is the reason in January we're starting a series, Winning the War in Your Mind. It's based on a popular book by Pastor Craig Rochelle, but it all talks about us taking hold of the way we think and then how that will impact the way we act. But man, if I suffuse my life with worship music, with Christian fellowship, with prayer, with reading the Bible, then that helps me take hold of my mind, because what I'm putting in is good and is healthy and is life-bringing, not the opposite way. And so guys, today, I want to invite us as we stand to sing our final songs to think on how we can live this out. And perhaps more importantly, who it is in our life that we can live this out with. That one person or that one family that just pops into our mind that we can invite to Christmas Eve, or we can invite to service in January as we move forward, because man, I want to share that gospel with them. Let's stand and sing to a King who is worthy.